deserves a position there, a role there.
Prime Minister Modi during Operation Sindoor made it amply clear that war has never been India's choice. We are with the side of peace. We are neither neutral nor indifferent. We are with peace.
We would have dealt with the US a whole lot on trade and those kinds of things, and that's not as certain these days. So we have to go back and look at our European partners, our Asian partners.
An opportunity to exchange, to have a dialogue, to have a debate on a different perspective on finding the solution of the conflict.
First thing that is important to have a common ground, and that we do have with humanitarian laws and human rights, but also to say, okay, what does it mean for us as a country to act on these laws and how can we work together?
When we realize that there's something wrong with democracy, the institutions and policies, values come together and we take stock, and it's possible then to improve and chart a new course for democracy.
It's the people's right to self-determination, and if they want to be independent, they should be independent. We will not start a war against Greenland.
In the midst of this, life persists. In the midst of untruth, truth persists.
What we can do as
Hello and welcome. You're watching NewsX World's The Newsroom. Now in this bulletin, we are going to give you a roundup of all the top stories that happened today across the world. Whether from the west to the east, to the northern hemisphere, to the southern hemisphere, we are going to give you a quick roundup of everything that mattered and everything that has consequence and impact. Let's start, in fact, with the meeting that was held between two of the greatest and the strongest leaders of the world. We're talking about US President Donald Trump and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Donald Trump hosted Netanyahu at his Mar-a-Lago estate in Florida. On agenda was the Gaza ceasefire, talks on Iran, and everything that is now posing a threat to Israel. I have my colleague Rema to join me in this discussion. Rema, could you help us take our viewers through some of the key takeaways from this meeting?
Yes, Kriti, of course, this meeting between the US President Donald Trump and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu comes at a time when the US President Donald Trump is actually pushing for his big bets towards the end of the year for the foreign policies. I would like to quickly take you through the key takeaways from this meeting. Most importantly, I would like to highlight the fact both the leaders, there was an outpouring of compliments towards each other. They were evidently heard touting their diplomatic relationship and their extraordinary friendship with each other. They have Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in fact mentioned that US President Donald Trump must be honored with the highest civilian award from Israel, and he has mentioned that the relationship between even Trump mentioned that, Israel and US's relationship in so many years, this year was different, and Israel, the bonding between the two countries would not have been the same had their ties would have not strengthened over time. However, to mention the main focus of the conversation or the discussion, their meeting was going to be on the Israel-Gaza war and the further truce. However, there was very little to no mention over the second phase and how how Israel is moving very slowly towards the second phase of the war, in the second phase of the truce deal. Trump, in fact, has entirely blamed Hamas for the agreement. He's mentioned that the ball is now in Hamas's court, and the fact that only if Hamas agrees to disarmament, there will be a second phase of they will move towards the second phase of the deal. And not to mention, both the leaders during the meeting, Trump has also raised, when asked about the West Bank annexation by Israel, Trump has in fact said that this is one subject that the two countries don't align with at all, and there is 100% disapproval from US President Donald Trump or United States for the annexation of West Bank. Israeli settlements expansion has in fact reached its peak in 2025 since 2027, and ICJ has declared annexation and expansion as illegal. And despite that, in the past couple of months, there were an increase in strikes in West Bank by Israel. Apart from Israel, Gaza and West Bank, Trump also took the platform to raise grave warnings to Iran for its development of nuclear missile programs. He's warned Iran to stop the program and instead go for a deal with United States to stop to stop the military actions.
Rama, talks on the Iran nuclear program as of now in this year have not seen any progress. In fact, a very crucial statement also came in from Iran today that retaliated to Donald Trump and said that if there is escalation on Iran, it would reply with a full throttle attack and there would not be any backing down. Iran is now increasingly getting the support of North Korea and other regional players like Russia also. Do you think now it is ready with its nuclear arsenal, even though no such statement has come in? Do we see escalation in this conflict, or do you think a dialogue could be arrived at as far as the Iran nuclear plan is concerned? Because most are saying that Iran is actually almost ready. It's only a matter of time that an announcement can come out.
Very interestingly, since you have mentioned, Trump during the meeting hinted at the fact that there are some very crucial reports that have come into the United States from the intelligence that that Iran has already developed its ballistic missile programs, and Trump and even Trump mentioned that there is no smoke without fire, to quote him. So of course, I think this is definitely hinting at the fact that this could be the next stage of next phase of war that we could be expecting in the upcoming time soon, very soon.
And talking about the Gaza ceasefire, like you said, Rema, that they are talking of going on to the next phase, but the point of contention remains the last remain hostages, mortal remains that have not yet returned to Gaza. That was part of the first phase of the ceasefire. So without having fully achieved the objectives of the first phase, how can the parties actually proceed to the next phase? And also do address for our viewers the question of the international stabilization force, which many countries, as you would know, are not ready to send their troops towards.
So the last, to mention about the first phase of the Gaza peace deal, like you mentioned, and then there will be a second phase of the truce deal. In the first phase, there was clear mention that Hamas will be returning the mortal remains of the hostages and the soldiers, and the last, apart from the last remaining body of the hostage, all the bodies have been returned to Israel. And despite that, Israel has continued its strikes in Gaza. Over hundreds have been killed since the first phase of peace deal, which was brokered by United States in October. So the only question now remains is how slow, why is there a delay And like I mentioned, Trump has completely blamed just Hamas for the delay in the truce, and Hamas officials, when they recently met in Qatar to discuss the second phase of the deal, there were of course questions over the fact that Israel is not ready for a truce with Hamas unless and until there is disarmament, that Hamas has completely refused to.
All right, very interesting developments indeed, Rema, you would agree, taking place. But let's now move on and tell our viewers about the developments that are taking place in Latin America, particularly Venezuela, and Trump's increasing aggression, not now just in Caribbean, but also with the US and the CIA launching a covert drone strike in Venezuela. Trump has now gone on to attack within the country. The CIA has carried out covert strikes, but very important, Rema, for viewers to note here and appreciate the fact that no such official statement has yet come out from any of the two countries, not from the US, not from the Venezuela. What do you think is really happening, and where is Trump now likely to stop as far as Venezuela and Maduro is concerned?
This, what we are looking at right now, in my opinion, is a new phase of war between Venezuela and United States, because now with the recent reports of the attacks that US President Donald Trump himself has confirmed that they have attacked the dock, which means that after several attacks on the boats in the past couple of months, now US is now moved from ocean to the land, which is the implementation, the home base for the land, attacking the borders of a country within the country, which is of course a new sign for the new phase of war in the standoff between Venezuela and United States. And I would also like to, since you mentioned CIA, I would like to give you the details of the strikes. While the exact location of the dock is the exact details of the dock which United States has targeted yesterday has not been specified. There are 2 people who have been killed in this strike, and as per reports, CIA used a drone attack in the attack. And when US President Trump was asked whether there is CIA involved, he hasn't denied or agreed or accepted the fact that CIA is involved. He has instead said that he knows who has carried out the strikes. However, there's no mention of what sort of intelligence or military was involved in this attack. But like I mentioned, this is a new phase of a standoff between both the countries, and I would also like to take you through the numbers of these strikes in the past couple of months. In September, 30 strikes have been carried out by United States on alleged Venezuelan drug boats, and more than 100 deaths have been reported so far. However, United States have failed to provide any evidence on whether these boats were carrying any drugs on board.
Rema, do you also see some intervention now coming in from China and Russia, which have earlier issued warnings against Trump's aggression, and also Argentina in Latin America has also warned against that aggression. So far, all these countries have not proceeded in Caribbean, but do you think they're going to continue to maintain strategic restraint? Or is there going to be a change in stance after this particular strike, especially when I believe 2 people have been killed?
I would like to mention here that the 2 countries have 2 different sides to this standoff. While United States is constantly to point out that Venezuela is carrying drugs, and they are probably carrying drugs to enable fentanyl in America, and hence United States has increased its strikes on the Venezuelan boats, while Maduro has completely refused. He has completely refused to comment on this, and he has said that these allegations are completely false, and rather United States is eyeing its oil reserves and is trying to attack the oil tankers. And recently there was also there was also an instance of there were 2 oil tankers that were seized. So considering Venezuela's rich oil production, there's high chances that that countries like China are also trying to maintain the diplomatic ties with the country, and hence there is very little intervention, while there is very obvious refusal and condemnation towards United States strikes towards Venezuela.
All right, thanks very much once again, Rema, for all your perspective and information that's coming in from our team. But do stay on with me. Another crucial development has taken place today, viewers, and that's in context to the Russia-Ukraine war. Today, Russia claimed that Ukraine allegedly carried out strikes at the residence of Russian President Putin's residence in Novgorod. Russia, of course, has denied those, Zelensky, of course, has denied those claims and says that it's only an attempt to derail the progress that have been made in the peace talks so far. Meanwhile, reactions have also come in from other leaders in the world. Donald Trump has warned Zelensky against any such aggression going ahead. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi has also expressed concern. We all know how Prime Minister Modi and Russian President Vladimir Putin continue to enjoy decades of strategic partnership. I'd like to bring in my colleague Rema here in the discussion. Rema, talk us through the statements that have come from Ukraine and Zelensky as far as the alleged strike on Putin's residence in Novgorod is concerned.
Kriti, I couldn't hear you. Could you come again?
Do take our viewers through the statements that have come from either party. To begin with, the statement that's come in from Zelensky as far as the strike on Putin's residence is concerned.
Yeah, so after the alleged attack on Putin's residence, there were reports that started pouring in yesterday. Kremlin has confirmed the attack. However, they have not been able to produce any legal evidence to confirm the attack on Putin's residence. In fact, Kremlin has said that, you know, the military, the army will be soon releasing the evidence. However, we have not seen any piece of evidence on this. There are no official reports that have come out as to when and how Putin's residence was attacked. Putin, however, also in a conversation with US President Donald Trump said that, you know, Russia's position will now change on the ongoing negotiations between the two countries after the alleged attack. And Zelensky has also completely denied the accusations about the attacks on the Russian President Putin's residence. And so far there hasn't been any update on, we are still waiting on the evidence whether Russian President Putin's residence was attacked by Ukrainian drones or not.
Rema, how do you view the statements that have come in from Donald Trump and other leaders of the world? We're talking about Narendra Modi, leaders of Pakistan who have expressed concerns over the attack. We of course know that they have continued to support Russia, purchased their oil and gas, but now they've also issued a statement which has apparently upset Zelensky, because he says that no such remark was made when Russia had indeed launched strikes on Ukraine's energy infrastructure.
Indeed, it's surprising even to consider President Donald Trump's reaction to this, and this is ongoing. This comes amid such a crucial time when both the countries are moving towards a peace. At least every time we hear about the countries meeting and the officials and delegation meeting and having phone calls about the negotiations, and then there comes a report about an attack on Russian President Putin's residence. So it's interesting to even see that, you know, Trump has also not paid much heed to the report. However, he's condemned it. Even the reactions from Indian Prime Minister Modi is very obvious because of the diplomatic ties that have really strengthened over a period of time between Russia and India. Of course, Zelensky has had support from the EU leaders lately. However, there is very little support that's been seen. Very little. There's little to no statement by India on support towards Ukraine. Over to you, Kriti.
In the midst of this, life persists. In the midst of untruth, truth persists.
Hello and welcome, I'm Thomas Porteous and you're watching The World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top headlines of the hour. US President Donald Trump says the United States could support another major strike on Iran if it rebuilds missile or nuclear programs and warns Hamas of severe consequences if it does not disarm. Speaking alongside Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, he suggests Tehran may be trying to restore its weapons capabilities. Meanwhile, a senior advisor to Iran's supreme leader warns that any aggression against the country will face an immediate harsh response after Donald Trump threatens to eradicate any nuclear rebuilding. He says Iran's missile and defense capabilities are not containable and will be used if provoked. President Trump also says the United States has destroyed a docking area used for alleged Venezuelan drug-running boats, calling it a major strike in the anti-narcotics campaign. He says the blast took out boats and the loading area, but declines to provide details on the location or the operation. China launches rockets around Taiwan as a second day of live fire drills begins, with footage showing rockets firing from the coast. Taiwan says it detects a surge in military activity, including 130 aircraft and multiple Navy and government vessels. The Saudi-led coalition says it launches a limited airstrike on Yemen's Mukalla port, targeting what it calls foreign military support for southern separatists. The strike comes amid escalating tensions between UAE-backed STC forces and Saudi-supported government troops, with no immediate reports of casualties. Bangladesh's former Prime Minister Khaleda Zia dies at age 80. Her Bangladesh National Party says the party announces she passed away early on Tuesday and asks supporters to pray for her. Russia accuses Ukraine of trying to attack President Vladimir Putin's residence and vows retaliation while providing no evidence. Ukraine denies the claim as fabricated and says the row threatens already difficult peace talks. Israel defends its recognition of Somaliland as an independent state as several countries at the UN question whether the move is linked to Palestinian displacement or military bases. The Arab League says it rejects any actions that could facilitate forced displacement of Palestinians or use Somali ports for military purposes. Those are the headlines for the hour, and we start in the Middle East, and Saudi Arabia has bombed the Yemeni port city of Mukalla. targeting a shipment of weapons it says was sent by the United Arab Emirates to a separatist group. The attack marks a significant escalation in tensions between Riyadh and the Southern Transitional Council, backed by the UAE. Saudi officials claim the shipment arriving from the UAE's Fujairah port posed a threat to security and stability. The Saudi-led coalition conducted airstrikes on weapons and combat vehicles unloaded at the port, and the UAE has not yet commented on the attack. Joining us now in this discussion is Shruti Dasgupta. She is an international affairs expert. She joins us live from New Delhi. Thank you very much for joining us, Shruti. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. Shruti, how dangerous is this moment? Is this going to show or lead to a complete breakdown of relations with Riyadh and Abu Dhabi?
Well, they've had this particular kind of skirmish earlier also, Thomas, and I found that if there is an attack by Saudi, it is backed by US, and UAE is pretty much aware of the consequences of this kind of an action. So I don't think it is going to be a point of escalation, because they've already called it a limited precision strike per se, and they're only targeting suspected weapons carriers, which is something that US is doing itself by attacking vessels which they suspect of carrying drugs and arms to USA. So I don't think there's going to be international condemnation of it. There is going to be a diplomatic freeze, but it is not going to be official, because officially UAE is not sending those weapons. So it's not going to be official, but under the surface there are going to be plenty of ruffled feathers and ripples that might end up in having bigger consequences in the days to come.
Indeed, Saudi Arabia, of course, claims that this shipment posed a national security threat. Does that justify striking a Yemeni port?
Well, Saudi Arabia is supporting the GCC-backed government. So when they say that this is an anti-Yemeni vessel which is carrying weapons to the STC, which have demanded a separation of southern Yemen from the GCC-controlled Yemen and the Houthis-controlled Yemen. So this is, as I've said earlier on your programs, this is UAE trying to carve out a piece of the pie and try and gain control of a small sliver of southern Yemen, which is also oil-rich, has important ports, and the STC has made its demands repeatedly in the past few months. So this is something that, because GCC is Saudi Arabia-backed, it does not seem like an outside interference. It is most likely the government will be very much in favor of this particular attack, and there should be no problem between Yemen and Saudi Arabia. Yemen as in the internationally recognized GCC government, Yemen, and Saudi Arabia related to this particular attack.
Yeah, and Shruti, do you think this essentially derails ongoing diplomatic efforts to stabilize Yemen as a sovereign nation?
Well, the major problem for Yemen is the Houthi-controlled regions, and rather than the STC-controlled regions. The STC and the GCC-backed regions, mostly both of them repel Houthis. Although they have different powers that are backing them, but right now I think for Yemen, whatever peace they're looking for end of the Houthi regime and having the GCC control the entire region. Whether this particular region separates itself, UAE demands its pound of flesh, is something that will be seen later. I don't think that it is going to derail peace agreements in such, because the peace agreements that we keep talking about are usually related to Houthis and not to the STC. STC wants its piece of pie and has demanded it again and again. And for all you know, someday soon UAE will back its claim for a separate southern Yemen, and maybe some international powers in debt to UAE will agree with it. So this is something that we'll see in the days to come.
Shruti Dasgupta, do stay with us as we move on to our next story. And we move to East Asia, and China has fired rockets into the Taiwan Strait as it continues its live-fire drills around Taiwan for a second day. The drills, which include naval and air exercises, come after the US announced a massive arms sale to Taiwan, angering Beijing. China claims these drills are aimed at what they call separatist forces in Taiwan and external interference. Taiwan's defense ministry reported over 130 military aircraft near the island, with 90 crossing the unofficial median line in the strait. Taiwan has responded by deploying its own military forces, and President Lai Ching-te assured the public that Taiwan will act responsibly, avoiding further escalation. US President Donald Trump, however, downplayed the drills, calling them a long-standing routine, and emphasized his strong relationship with Chinese President Xi Jinping. Let's listen in to what US President Donald Trump had to say on the issue.
Well, I have a great relationship with President Xi, and he hasn't told me anything about it. I certainly have seen it, but he hasn't told me anything about it, and I don't believe he's going to be doing it.
Andrew KP Leung joins us now, a China strategist live from Hong Kong. Andrew, thank you very much for talking to us. China says that these drills are aimed at separatists. Isn't this simply military intimidation against a democratic society designed to break Taiwan's will rather than address any real threat in regards to these ongoing military drills?
Well, President Trump says that there's nothing unusual. It's been going on for many decades, which is true. But of course, Beijing is doubling down. Not more of the same, but this is a massive military encirclement of Taiwan. And then it serves as several important objectives. The first is to deter separatist movement, because characterized by the election of a long-known separatist as the Taiwan leader. And secondly, there is a sign of increasing foreign interference, putting spanner in the works in the Beijing's ultimate aim of peaceful unification. For example, the new Japanese Prime Minister Takaichi's recent provocative remark tying Japan's national security with what's going to happen on Taiwan for whatever reason, and that is crossing China's red line. And of course, that Taiwan is increasingly being seen by Beijing as being used as a pawn by the United States to rattle and to stir up the muddy waters and changing the kind of dynamics. Under the Taiwan Relations Act, which has been a long time U.S. legislation, the U.S. keeps on supplying arms to Taiwan, and this latest arm is a historical a massive sale. Although these weapons are by no means cutting edge, but nevertheless, the intention seems to be to turn Taiwan into a military porcupine. And then this is read in conjunction with American military assets in the first island chain centered in Okinawa, the second island chain centered in Guam, together with American military forming closer military alliance between Japan and South Korea, and also with the Quad, including India, but also Australia, the Australian UK nuclear submarine deal, and that's tightening the encirclement of China. If you look at the map. So this is the Beijing's a very robust response against these threats or interference, but also the Taiwan unification, of course, has been elevated to the national and constitutional level, has been enshrined in China's constitution, and it's also highlighted in President Xi's numerous statements on Taiwan. The aim is for Taiwan to peacefully return to the motherland, and the latest deadline is 2049, which is the 100th anniversary of the founding of the People's Republic of China. Now, the aim is still peaceful unification, also encapsulated in 3 white papers issued over the past decades, the last coinciding with the provocative visit of Nancy Pelosi to Taiwan.
Yes.
Now, the peaceful unification is going to be supported by 3 strategies. The first one is military deterrence. Second one is economic and diplomatic isolation. And the third one is people-to-people exchanges. The two peoples are increasingly intertwined economically, and also business-wise, and on tourism, and so on. Now, there's still time before 2049, but then the military exercise is very highly robust, including air service,
Yes.
to air missiles and so on,
Andrew.
is to deter any separatist movements.
Of course, you said this isn't the first time. Of course, you've also mentioned Donald Trump's reaction, which seems to be pretty minor. Do you think China is preparing the world psychologically for a future military move on Taiwan by testing these nerves, the boundaries, and the international reaction?
Yes. No, I think that this is not testing the reaction. That's not the main objective. The main objective is, of course, a military deterrence against any foreign intervention, but also to deter separatist movements. But I think that this inevitable display of military power also fits into the highly problematic and misplaced narrative about 2027, because there is a popular belief in Western media that Taiwan, that Beijing somehow wants to take advantage of the current turmoil around the world to invade Taiwan and to achieve unification by forceful means. Well, this is highly misplaced and highly distorted, because President Xi did mention 2027, but that was an aim for China's military to position itself as to be an invincible kind of deterrence against any kind of threats. But this is only a target for readiness, not a target for action. The action still remains peaceful unification through the 3 strategies which I've outlined: military, economic, diplomatic, and also people-to-people exchanges.
Okay, Andrew KP Liang, thank you very much for joining us here in NewsX World. It's a pleasure to talk to you as always. We now move over to South Asia for our next story. And Bangladesh's first female Prime Minister and Bangladesh Nationalist Party chief, Begum Khaleda Zia, has died at the age of 80 after a prolonged illness. The BNP said Khaleda Zia passed away early on Tuesday morning at a hospital in the Bangladesh capital of Dhaka, where she had been undergoing treatment for multiple health complications, including liver cirrhosis, heart and lung infections, and diabetes. A 3-time Prime Minister, Khaleda Zia entered politics after the assassination of her husband, former President Ziaur Rahman, and went on to become a central figure in Bangladesh's democratic transition. She was elected Prime Minister in 1991, becoming the country's first woman to hold the post, and later she served 2 more terms. Her rivalry with Sheikh Hasina dominated Bangladeshi politics for decades, shaping the country's political landscape. Joining us once again to discuss this is Shruti Dasgupta. Shruti, was Khaleda Zia ultimately a builder of Bangladeshi democracy? What will be her legacy?
Well, Khaleda Zia was instrumental in a lot of foreign policies of Bangladesh. Although she was held as a political prisoner when her husband revolted against the Pakistani army to form the independent Bangladesh, she still had a very soft corner towards Pakistan. In the absence of Awami League and Sheikh Hasina, the nation is left without actual voice which understands the reality of the times that they had lived through. So she, although she influenced the Pakistani soft corner, their entire party's motto was not Delhi, not Pindi, Bangladesh first, which basically refers to not Delhi, not Rawalpindi, but put Bangladesh first. So this is the legacy that Ziaur Rahman and Khaleda Zia left behind. They were polarizing because in the in the 2016 odd elections, she had formed a coalition with Jamaat-e-Islami, which denies the entire 1971 war and its realities. So, for political power in the later years, the party, BNP and Khaleda Zia kind of broke away from their independent Bangladesh ideology and sided with this particular Jamaati group. So now, again, with her absence, her son has taken over BNP. He, of course, has also understood the realities of the particular war that both his parents fought for. She suffered an assassination of her husband. She became the first prime minister of Bangladesh. She herself is the legacy of Bangladesh. She touched people of Bangladesh in a way with her soft, docile, polite manner, as well as understanding the ground up politics of the nation. So there is definitely going to be a huge mourning that the nation is going to go through when the lady passes away, and there is going to be a bigger question of who's going to be the next Bangladeshi prime minister. In her absence, BNP might feel a little lesser than what it was.
And Shruti, of course, there's elections coming up. Without its iconic leader, does the BNP have a credible path forward?
Well, BNPs have signed up with Inqilab Moncho, whose leader, Osman Hadi, was very popular. His death caused riots across the nation. So they have a popular front as well in coalition with them. Her son Tariq Rahman has also come back. All the cases against him have been dropped, and so he has filed for nomination in those two places. There have been a few positive social media as well as grounds reports of how he is also trying to build connections, but he is not Khaleda Zia. And there is, of course, as I said, an absence of Sheikh Hasina in the entire game. So the politics of Bangladesh is set to change. Now, if in 2026, apart from the elections, if they hold the referendum, now that is going to change the entire politics of the subcontinent, because that referendum has a very small, beautiful caveat which allows for external mediation and oversight over elections, which where the positives part of the referendum asks for 2 houses and limits the number of terms a prime minister can do. So all of these things are going to lead the people of Bangladesh to vote yes on the referendum. But this particular caveat will also come in force when they vote yes. That means there's always going to be external supervision. For me, that means that probably Muhammad Yunus or somebody from outside will always be able to guide the politics and the policies of Bangladesh in the days to come if the referendum goes into force.
Shruti Dasgupta, as always, it's a pleasure to speak to you. Thank you very much for joining us here on NewsX World. We now move over to North America, and Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum has travelled to Oaxaca after a deadly train derailment that killed nearly 13 people. The crash, which occurred near the town of Ninzada, left 98 injured, 5 critically. And the interoceanic train carrying 250 passengers went off track on Sunday. Sheinbaum visited survivors and families of the victims, pledging financial aid of 30,000 pesos to those affected. The Mexican Navy, which operates the rail line, confirmed the incident, and authorities are investigating the cause. The Mexican Army and civil protection teams are assisting with rescue efforts. Let's take a listen into the Mexican president.
Se va a dar un primer apoyo a todas las familias. Para que no tengan que estar haciendo gastos, se le está dando apoyo funerario y todo lo que se requiera para el apoyo a las familias. Y vamos a estar en contacto con ellos en el momento en que la Fiscalía pueda determinar lo más pronto posible la causa, se nos va a dar un...
And in the Middle East, once again, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu held a late-night conference call from Florida with US tech billionaire Elon Musk, Transportation Minister Miri Regev, and National AI Directorate head Erez Askal, ahead of Netanyahu's scheduled meeting with US President Donald Trump. According to the Prime Minister's office, Musk confirmed he will attend a smart transportation conference in Israel in March, signalling continued engagement with Israel's technology and mobility sectors. The call focused on expanding cooperation with Tesla, particularly on advancing legislation related to autonomous vehicles. Officials discussed regulatory frameworks aimed at accelerating the deployment of self-driving technologies in Israel. Netanyahu and Musk also spoke about strengthening collaboration in artificial intelligence development. The two have previously discussed AI ethics, most notably during a public panel at Tesla's California factory in September of 2023. We intend to propel Israel forward and turn it into a global leader in the field, just as we did in cyber and other technologies, Benjamin Netanyahu said, underlining Israel's ambition to position itself at the forefront of AI innovation. The talks come as Israel looks to deepen ties with leading global tech firms while aligning innovation goals with transportation, AI governance and future mobility strategies. Well, that's all that we have time for this hour. Keep watching NewsX World for more international updates.
What we can do as the Interparliamentary Union to strengthen democracy, to promote human rights, to ensure that humanitarian law is respected.
UN Security Council needs a makeover, a comprehensive reform, and India deserves a position there, a role there.
Prime Minister Modi during Operation Sindoor made it amply clear that war has never been India's choice. We are with the side of peace. We are neither neutral nor indifferent. We are with peace.
We would have dealt with the U.S. a whole lot on trade and those kinds of things, and that's not as certain these days. So we have to go back and look at our European partners, our Asian partners.
An opportunity to exchange, to have a dialogue, to have a debate on a different perspective on finding the solution of the conflict.
First thing that is important to have a common ground, and that we do have with humanitarian laws and human rights, but also to say, okay, what does it mean for us as a country to act on these laws and how can we work together?
When we realize that there's something wrong with democracy, the institutions and policies, values come together and we take stock, and it's possible then to improve and chart a new course for democracy.
It's the people's right to self-determination, and if they want to be independent, they should be independent. We will not start a war against Greenland.
Hello and welcome. I'm Kriti Mehta and you're watching the World Report on NewsX World. Let's start with a check of the top headlines this hour. Yemen's Presidential Council cancelled UAE defense deal, paving the way for UAE forces in Yemen to leave within 24 hours. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi, Donald Trump among world leaders to express concern over the attack on Russian President Vladimir Putin's residence. Ukraine's foreign minister called on other countries to refrain from responding to what he said were false Russian reports about an attack on Putin's residence, saying they undermine peace process. Taiwan's defense ministry says PLA rockets fell into areas that were closest to main Taiwan island compared to the previous drills. Donald Trump says the United States could support another major strike on Iran if it rebuilds missile or nuclear programs, and warns Hamas of severe consequences if it does not disarm. Speaking alongside Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, he suggests Tehran may be trying to restore its weapons capabilities. A senior advisor to Iran's supreme leader warns that any aggression against the country will face an immediate harsh response after Donald Trump threatens to eradicate any nuclear rebuilding. He says Iran's missile and defense capabilities are not containable and will be used if provoked. Donald Trump says he's not concerned about China's military drills around Taiwan, calling them long-standing naval exercises. The comments come as Beijing stages blockade-style maneuvers near the island following a large U.S. arms sale to Taiwan. Meta Platforms Meta O is buying AI startup Manus to deepen its push into agentic AI, aiming to embed the technology across its platforms as competition for next-generation AI intensifies. Let's start with the top focus on World Report now. Taiwan's military says that China was unable to impose a blockade during its latest live fire drills around the self-ruled island. According to a senior defense official, Beijing's exercises did not prevent ships from entering or leaving Taiwanese waters, contradicting claims that the drills were designed to isolate the island. Deputy Chief of the General Staff for Intelligence, Haisen Jinsheng, said Taiwan's Coast Guard confirmed that no effective blockade took place. China has stepped up military pressure on Taiwan in recent years, staging frequent drills and patrols near the island. Meanwhile, Taipei says it continues to closely monitor Chinese military activity and remains prepared to respond to any escalation. All right, I request Ross Feingold, who's a political analyst, to join me in this discussion. He joins us from Taipei. Thank you very much, Mr. Feingold, for joining me here at NewsX World. Mr. Feingold, what really is inspiring this confidence in Taiwan? When it says that China will not be able to actually blockade the main island, and if it actually does so, it is prepared to counter it. Do they know that Japan and US will intervene if the situation comes to that?
Nobody knows whether or not the United States or Japan would intervene in the event of armed aggression from China or even a blockade of Taiwan, simply because that decision could only be made by the leaders of Japan and the United States at the time that event occurs. Neither country, neither the United States nor Japan, have a treaty obligation to come to Taiwan's assistance. So it'll be a political decision made by the U.S. president and or the Japanese prime minister at the time that occurs. As far as projecting an image of confidence today, of course, Taiwan government will do that. Ultimately, they're politicians as well. They want to let the public here in Taiwan know that the situation is under control. And an important part of that is letting the public and the international community know that ships are still able to sail and aircraft are still able to fly. Now, there are exclusion zones where live fire from China was landing. And obviously, ships and aircraft have to avoid live fire zones. But it's true that China did not completely put a blockade on Taiwan, and this was meant to be a military exercise. It wasn't meant to be an actual blockade anyway.
Yeah.
But yes, it's understandable that the Taiwan government wants to let the domestic audience and international audience know that aircraft and ships could still proceed.
Well, that's also the statement that's coming from Donald Trump. He's saying that he's not really concerned about these drills as they are probably routine. Why then is Taiwan escalating the situation? Is it only for the international players to be alert about the situation?
First, we have to keep in mind the party that's escalating this situation is China, not Taiwan, because it's China that's decided to carry out this very large and frankly, dangerous military exercise. Anytime there's live fire in a place where there's busy shipping lanes and a large amount of civilian aircraft, there is some danger that is inherent with that. But we also have to be frank. Taiwan probably did not like what President Trump said. Taiwan probably would have preferred that President Trump said something that stood up for Taiwan and criticized China. But that's not what President Trump said. Instead of saying that China is wrong to do this and we stand with Taiwan, President Trump said he basically said this appears to be a routine military exercise of the kind that China's been doing for many, many years. So that's probably not the message that the government in Taiwan wanted to hear. They probably would have preferred something that demonstrated greater support.
All right, Mr. Feingold, one last question that I want to take up with you. The silence of Takaichi amidst all this is quite conspicuous, given the statements, very, strong statements that she had made earlier. Then there were internal protests within her own country asking her to retract those remarks. She did not do so, but no further comment has come in from her. Do you think it has anything to do with her meeting with Trump?
Or the phone call with Trump. President Trump spoke to Xi Jinping on November 24th and then spoke with Takaichi shortly after that. And there was a lot of reporting about whether or not President Trump suggested to Takaichi that she kind of find a way to reduce tensions with China. Japanese government denied that. But it does appear that she has tried to reduce tensions since that phone call with President Trump. And yeah, the lack of a statement from Japan and from Takaichi specifically, frankly, that's another disappointment for the Taiwan government. Keeping in mind that in the middle of November, Taiwan's president and a whole bunch of other politicians here in Taiwan, they rushed to put photos of themselves on social media eating Japanese seafood in the aftermath of a Chinese ban on Japanese seafood. So yeah, I think Taiwan would have liked to see some reciprocal action by Japan, and it hasn't happened yet.
All right, then. Thanks very much, Mr. Feingold, for speaking to us and giving your perspective. And with that, viewers, we're now going to shift to news from Bangladesh, where a Hindu garment worker deployed as a security guard has been reportedly shot dead by a colleague inside a government factory in Bangladesh's Mymensingh district. As per reports, the incident took place around 6:45 p.m. at Sultana Sweaters Limited, a Labib Group factory located in the Bhulakka Upzila. The victim has been identified as 42-year-old Bajendra Biswas, an Ansar member posted at the factory. Police said the accused 29-year-old Noman Mia was also serving as an Ansar member at the same unit. According to police and eyewitness accounts, both men were on security duty and staying inside the Ansar barracks within the factory premises. During an interaction, Noman Mia allegedly pointed a government-issued shotgun at Biswas in a casual or joking manner. Moments later, the firearms discharged, with the bullet hitting Biswas in the left thigh. Biswas was rushed to the Bhulakka Upzila Health Complex, where doctors declared him dead. Concerned police station in charge, Muhammad Jahidul Islam, said the accused has been arrested and the shotgun used in the incidents has been seized. The body has been sent to Mymensingh Medical College Hospital for post-mortem examination. I now request a retired Major General Sudhakar Ji, who is a senior strategic and international affairs expert, to join me in this discussion. Thank you very much, General, for being available to us for this conversation. Now, this is the third such killing of a Hindu man in Bangladesh in the recent times, in the last few weeks. So, Dhakarji, I just want to bring this to your, notice that when Christian minorities were being allegedly ethnically cleansed in Nigeria, Donald Trump had struck the Islamic State actors there. Hindu minorities in Bangladesh are there's a big threat to them. More and more deaths are being reported now. What action do you think the international players, especially neighboring India, should take?
Good evening, Kriti. Good, brilliant question you have asked, and you have drawn a very good parallel also. Nothing. I'm saying simple answer is nothing. You have given two subparts: international stakeholders, nothing; India, nothing. Because the environment obtaining in Nigeria in relation to USA is different than the environment obtaining in Bangladesh in relation to India. So this is to be understood. When I say environment, what is the environment that is prevailing, in particularly in Bangladesh? Firstly, Bangladesh is contiguous to India. Once upon a time, it is to be part and parcel, an integral part of undivided British India, and it continued to remain contiguous because geography cannot be changed. Anything that happens in Bangladesh has got a ripple effect and it will spread onto India. And also, India is being hemmed from both sides, Pakistan and Bangladesh, and we are aware of our immediate neighborhood, whether it is Maldives, Sri Lanka, Nepal, Bangladesh. So we have gone through a series of experiences in the recent past. Therefore, the situation is different. And in a country like Bangladesh, it's not only one stakeholder. There is a American CIA in play. There is a Chinese angle. There is also an angle of Islamic fundamentalism, who are bent upon spreading the Islamic, the Sharia law, and more so, it is predominated by the election to be held on 12th of February, after Yunus has taken over as interim government. So the dynamics of Bangladesh is totally different, and the dynamics of Nigeria, why America could do it is because America is a superpower. It is the largest economy in the world, and it is a couple of miles, thousands of miles or kilometers away from Nigeria, and there are only two primary castes, Christians and Muslims, and it is adjoining the corridor of Sahel corridor dominated by ISIS. So therefore, they have easy stakes to actually exercise, whereas India, anything doing in Bangladesh will be subjected to all kinds of noise all over, particularly the Western media. Therefore, India, there is also a threat that India, if it goes in a kinetic form, it is likely to be drawn in for a long-drawn battle or a conflict. A long-drawn conflict is exactly what the adversaries they want India to be, so that the economy is bled to death and India no longer can progress at a speed and rate at which we are progressing today. So these are the ramifications why India will do nothing, why USA can very easily extend its or assert its clout and military might and strike the ISIS, who are clinching the Christians in Nigeria. These are the differences. Back to you, Kriti.
All right, do stay on with me, Sudhakarji. Let's have your opinion going forward as well. Viewers, now in some news from Iran, it has declared the Royal Canadian Navy as a terrorist organization, citing retaliation for Canada's 2024 backlisting of the country's Revolutionary Guards, or the IRGC. Tehran said Ottawa's designation of the Guards as a terror group violated international law, prompting a reciprocal move. Canada has barred IRGC members from entering the country and froze their assets, accusing the force of human rights abuses and destabilizing actions abroad. The decision comes in the shadow of the 2020 downing of flight PS 752, in which 85 Canadians were killed, an incident the IRGC admitted to, claiming it mistook the plane for a hostile target. All right, request Sudhakarji to join us back in the discussion here.
I am there, I am available.
Sudhakarji, I'd like to take your mind back to the time when Trump had said that he wanted Canada to be the 51st state of USA. Do you think this a fresh statement that's coming in from Canada, while there are tensions brewing between the US and Iran, could have much to do with it?
Yes, it has. It is to be understood from the perspective that on one side there is an angle of Iran versus Canada. The other side there is an angle between Iran and USA. When you talk about Iran versus Canada, our mind should go back to 2012. Since 2012, there have been ding-dong battle going on of very blatant and aggressive statements between both the countries, Canada and Iran, and each one has been imposing some restriction or calling a shot as far as the diplomatic angles are concerned. But the turning point came in 2020, like you rightly said, after the flight
Yeah.
that ST-752, after it took off from Tehran, it was shot down. And immediately after that, Canada came down very heavily
Yeah.
and started calling the Iranian, that is revolutionary,
God.
Islamic Revolutionary IRGC, Guards Corps.
Yeah.
They branded it as a terrorist organization. Since then, it has been going on. They may not have formally declared, but it has been going on for quite some time. And I think 2022, they made a formal promulgation. And in response to that, Iran has taken up a tit for tat or a retaliatory measure and started calling the Canadian Navy as a terrorist organization. Now, what does it mean when you brand a particular organization? What does it mean? That means to the people of IRGC, they cannot enter Canada. Their properties in Canada can be seized at ease, and they cannot contact with Canadian officials and the people. So these are the restrictions. And same goes when they impose some restrictions on the Canadian Navy, similar thing is also applied. So it's a retaliation which they have imposed. As far as USA, Canada and Iran are concerned, I believe that there is a little thaw which is taking place. 51st state has been a statement of the past.
Yeah.
Now the Canadian leadership and Americans are warming up, particularly Donald Trump. There is a change of mind, but knowing Donald Trump and his transactional behavior, what will come next is anybody's guess. For the moment, I would say I tend to agree with you and your statement in the question. Definitely it is showing a platform of convergence as far as Canada and USA are concerned.
Yeah.
And they are showing signatures of going back to the old bonhomie
Yeah.
to some extent, not to a large extent. So therefore, it will be fair to say maybe this statement which is coming as branding IRGC as a terrorist organization it's a common statement from both USA as also Canada together against Iran, and this is happening in the backdrop of things heating up in preparation for a strike, a combat strike by USA, Israel, duly supported by USA against Iran. The strike could take place anytime so as to discourage Iran going nuclear, which to my mind, if I join the dots, they have already gone nuclear. It is just a matter of coming out in open and declaring to the world that they have nuclear weapons. This is my assessment. I may be wrong, but have given my research and studies so far for past 10 years, I think Iran has gone nuclear. They have got nuclear arsenal right since 2000, not now. Back to you, Kriti.
All right. So, Dhakarji, one last question. How do you also see the response from Iran coming in when Trump has warned Tehran against any escalation? Tehran is also saying in the event of an attack, it will go full throttle as well.
There is a beautiful one-liner which is floating around in the social media, which has got a lot of merit and meaning. It says that I think 14 presidents in USA, 10 prime ministers in Israel, 2 queens. Queen means Britain queens.
Yeah.
They could not do any harm. Or sorry, they could not change the regime, or they couldn't inflict the damage and prevent Iran from testing and progressing in their nuclear reactors, and what's to that effect. So it goes to say, despite the Iranian revolution which took place in 1979, this has been a long spectrum of activity putting pressure on Iran and trying to deter it from asserting its military might. So do our viewers, will they believe that Iran is one of the few countries in the world, despite what it has been subjected to of sanction, of attrition, military attrition, it has got some of the best hypersonic missiles which move at a speed between 10 to 11 Mach or maybe 8 to 10 Mach. That means it is 8 times faster than the speed of sound, and it can avoid any kind of radars in the world today. Although the range, it is going to be mounted on ICBM or on the ballistic missile. The range is giving them a reach up to Israel, say, but time is not far I am given to understand, my open source studies indicates that North Korea also is in collaboration with Iran. China is supporting Iran. Russia is supporting Iran. For all you know, one fine day we may be, mounted with a surprise that here is the ICBM of 12,000, 15,000, which Pakistan is asserting to have received from North Korea or one of these countries. So the Iran also could very well deter and also threat to punish America directly. So under these circumstances, the retaliation from Iran, notwithstanding the military attrition which has been subjected to in the recent past, particularly 11th of June 2025, is going to be very heavy, and it is going to be insurmountable in comparative terms. That means what? That means that it would their basic objective is to make sure that Israel ceases to exist on the map of Middle East. That is not going to be achieved so easily. But the retaliation definitely is going to be very, very hard-hitting and very intense, as per my assessment. Back to you, Kriti.
All right. Thank you very much, General Sudhakar, for joining me with your opinion here. And with that, viewers, we're now going to move ahead. Now, a renewed ceasefire between Thailand and Cambodia over the violent border clashes has now passed the 72-hour mark, which was the initial target set by both countries to halt fighting, protect civilians and lay the groundwork for a more lasting peace. The agreement halted 20 days of fighting that killed at least 101 people and displaced more than 500,000. Now, Thailand has delayed the release of 18 Cambodian soldiers over alleged drone violations, which Cambodia denies, saying it has banned drone use nationwide. Meanwhile, China has helped mediate talks between the two nations, aiming to rebuild the trust and consolidate the ceasefire. But both sides continue to monitor developments closely. And moving ahead, in a significant financial move, NVIDIA has purchased $5 billion worth of Intel shares. The American semiconductor giant made the announcement in a filing confirming the completion of the transaction first announced in September. NVIDIA brought over 214 million shares at $23.28 each in a private placement. The deal is seen as a critical lifeline for Intel, which has struggled with financial challenges and high production costs. The US Federal Trade Commission cleared the deal earlier this month, and despite the purchase, NVIDIA's stocks saw a slight dip, while Intel's remained rather stable. That's all we have time for. Do keep watching NewsX World.
In the midst of death, life persists. In the midst of untruth, truth persists.
Hello and welcome, I'm Thomas Porteous and you're watching The World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at the top headlines of the hour. US President Donald Trump says the United States could support another major strike on Iran if it rebuilds missile or nuclear programs and warns Hamas of severe consequences if it does not disarm. Speaking alongside Benjamin Netanyahu, he suggests Tehran may be trying to restore its weapons capabilities. Meanwhile, a senior advisor to Iran's supreme leader warns that any aggression against the country will face an immediate harsh response after Donald Trump threatens to eradicate any nuclear rebuilding. He says Iran's missile and defense capabilities are not containable and will be used if provoked. Donald Trump also says the United States has destroyed a docking area used for alleged Venezuelan drug-running boats, calling it a major strike in the anti-narcotics campaign. He says the blast took out boats and the loading area, but declines to provide details on the location or the operation. China launches rockets around Taiwan as a second day of live fire drills begins, with footage showing rockets firing from the coast. Taiwan says it detects a surge in activity, including 130 aircraft and multiple Navy government vessels near the island. The Saudi-led coalition says it launches a limited airstrike on Yemen's Murkala port, targeting what it calls foreign military support for southern separatists. The strike comes amid escalating tensions between UAE-backed STC forces and Saudi-supported government troops. Bangladesh's former Prime Minister Khaleda Zia dies at aged 80, her Bangladesh National Party has said. The party announces she passed away earlier on Tuesday and asks supporters to pray for her. Russia accuses Ukraine of trying to attack President Vladimir Putin's residence and vows retaliation while providing no evidence. Ukraine denies the claim as fabricated and says the row threatens already difficult peace talks. Israel defends its recognition of Somaliland as an independent state as several countries at the UN question whether the move is linked to Palestinian displacement or military bases. The Arab League says it rejects any actions that could facilitate forced displacement of Palestinians or use Somali ports for military purposes. Those are the top headlines for the hour, but for our top story, we start in the United States, and President Donald Trump has raised concerns over Iran rebuilding its nuclear program following US airstrikes in June that targeted 3 Iranian nuclear facilities. Trump warned that if Iran resumes its nuclear activities, the US would act swiftly to stop it, suggesting the response could be more powerful than the last time. Trump also indicated US support for Israeli action against Iran's missile program, while continuing to support Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. However, Iran has denied seeking nuclear weapons and dismissed talks on its missile program. Listen in to what the US President Donald Trump had to say on the issue.
Now I hear that Iran is trying to build up again, and if they are, we're going to have to knock them down. We'll knock them down. We'll knock the hell out of them, but hopefully that's not happening. I heard Iran wants to make a deal. If they want to make a deal, that's much smarter. You know, they could have made a deal the last time before we went through, you know, a big attack on them, and they decided not to make the deal. They wish they made that deal. So I think, again, they should make a deal. They want to make a deal, but sometimes that doesn't happen.
Joining us now is Major General Sardar Kaji, a geopolitical strategist, joining us live from New Delhi. Thank you very much for joining us. As always, it is a pleasure. Trump says the next strike will be more powerful than the last. Do you think the region of West Asia should be getting ready for Israel, Iran, and possibly US involvement in a round 2 of fighting after these statements?
Thomas, good morning. Thank you for inviting me to your show once again. And as regards the question, the short answer is yes. It's just about round the corner, and this time it is going to be devastating. Either way, that is the assaulting strategy of US and Israel, and the response or the retribution by Iran. Because to my understanding, and my take on the whole issue is that while officially Iran may not be coming out in open that they have nuclear warheads ready, or they have crossed or they have reached the enrichment percentage required for nuclear hardware, my study and research indicates, and it suggests, that Iran reached the enrichment long time back. Almost about 2 years back. Let's take our mind back to 1945, Hiroshima, Nagasaki, the little boy which was dropped It had an enrichment of 86.7%, if I respect my memory. And Iran, 2 years back, had already reached an enrichment percentage of 87.7%. This is, although from open source, I have no classified domain or the moles available. My research is indicating that they have already exceeded the little boys threshold by 1% approximately, if not longer, at least 1 to 2 years back. So what does it indicate? It indicates that even though Iran was hit in the month of June, I think 11th of June, by American offensive, still they have been able to hide the nuclear warhead preparations in some clandestine location. The warheads are ready. It's not now, Thomas. From 2000 onwards, if you read and connect the New York Times and other Western media platform, and you connect the dots, one thing comes out very loud and clearly, that we are under a misconception as far as Iran is concerned. They have devastating weapon platform of mass destruction, and they are ready. It is just a matter of, a trigger for them to apply this particular dangerous warhead against a suitable target. Whether it is going to be Israel or something else, I really can't say. But as of today, the hypersonic capability which Iran has is one of the best in the world. And the ICBM and the intercontinental ballistic missile and the intermediate range missile, these are all up to 2,000 kilometers, 2,500 kilometers. So this range gives them a reach up to Israel, not across the Atlantic. So therefore, this also dispels the thought that Iran possibly in times ahead would be having a target in USA. No, I don't think so. They have that capability. It will be somewhere in the Middle East, and the primary target is going to be Israel. So let's not underestimate the capacity and the capability enhancement which Iran has gone through or has transited through, despite onslaught of offensive by Israel as also America. Last but not the least is that diplomacy and dialogue should be given a chance, because Middle East is always been torn apart, and I think peace has got some kind of importance and relevance in 21st century. These kind of threats and intimidation will not be taken kindly by any country, and that too, Iran is not a new country. It is to be one of the largest superpowers in the world back historically. So that has to be kept in mind when you actually threaten a country of this kind. Back to you, Thomas.
Yes, indeed. Of course, you speak of diplomacy, but of course the United States and Iran were having diplomatic negotiations when it came to the US's, when it came to Iran's nuclear program. But then, of course, Israel launched a surprise attack on the capital, ending those negotiations. It also soured relations within the United Nations and the IAEA. Is there realistically any diplomatic pathway left for this issue?
I take it persistence in any objective that we select, and also we should be mindful of the fact of the consequences. I personally feel if we persist and with a consistent and deep conviction, everything is possible. Why blame Netanyahu? You to take the example of Donald Trump himself, I am not casting aspersion. He would have his own justification and reason. He withdrew from the JCPOA in 2018. This is an agreement which had been established in 2015. There are 5 nations plus 1, Germany was there. And as per that agreement, Iran was supposed to be withholding its development of nuclear weapon, and in exchange of sanctions imposed over the country would be lifted. So this was the understanding. But as soon as Donald Trump came to power, within 1 year, I think he withdrew from the agreement. So if you have flip-flop kind of approach to such notable and important milestones and agreements, and there will be lack of consistency, and one will not be able to trust each other. So under this environment with lack of trust, we'll reach nowhere. So I think peace should be given a chance. Diplomacy still holds good even in 21st century. It was always holding good, diplomacy and dialogue. Iran should be given a chance to survive and live as a progressive nation, because the same Iran could become a cause of turmoil in the mainland of US. You never know when 9/11 or 7/7 is going to take place in a country like US. US is no longer what it used to be in Cold War 1.0. It is polarized, it is radicalized, and ISIS has infiltrated. All kinds of terrorist organizations are floating around in USA. So therefore, it is always better to engage with potential danger and threat which could actually destabilize not only Middle East, the complete world order. There will be some prudence and some logic, in my opinion, to hold out the olive green leaf for peace and harmony and go in for the diplomacy and dialogue. Back to you, Thomas.
Yes, indeed. Do stay with us, Major General G, as we move on to our next story. And Donald Trump says that he and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu have what they call an understanding on Syria, as both leaders discussed stability along Israel's border with the country. Speaking after their meeting in Florida, Netanyahu said Israel's interest is to maintain a peaceful border with Syria. Trump said he is confident Israel can get along with Syria's new president, Ahmed al-Shara, following the fall of Bashar al-Assad. The US president added that he would work to help Israeli and Syrian leaders cooperate, and said he hopes to lift US sanctions on Syria as part of a broader reset. Let's listen in.
We do have an understanding regarding Syria. Now, with Syria, you know, your new president, I respect him. He's a very strong guy, and that's what you need in Syria. You can't put a choir boy, you can't put somebody that's a perfect person. Everything's nice, no problems in life. You have the opposite there. He's a strong guy. We get along with him great. I can't ask for any more. He's been with us all the way. We had that mishap with ISIS, and he was with us all the way. He was fighting us. You know, he was fighting them. So I hope Israel. I'm sure that Israel and him will get along. I will try and make it so that they do get along.
Our interest is to have a peaceful border with Syria. Our interest is to have, and we openly say it, we want to make sure that the border area right next to our border is safe. We don't have terrorists, we don't have attacks, and we also want to secure our Druze friends. And by the way, I think not only the Druze, but other minorities, especially the Christians, should be protected as well in Syria and throughout the Middle East and in Nigeria.
Major General G joins us once again. Of course, Syria and Israel, two bordering nations, have had an extremely complicated relationship for decades. However, over this past year, we've seen Israel bomb Damascus and other parts of the country. And of course, also during the first Trump administration, we saw Donald Trump recognize the Golan Heights as part of Israeli territory. How do you see this relationship moving forward with Donald Trump at the helm and al-Shara in Syria and Netanyahu in Israel?
Very dangerous, Thomas. Very, very dangerous. You have already given out in the preamble of your question. Because these two countries, you see, people have to understand, our audience has to understand their neighbors. They have a common border of 83 kilometers. And Golan Heights was captured, if I respect my memory, it was in 1967. And they annexed it. They annexed it forcibly. The global order, the United Nations hasn't accepted this, by the way. They annexed Golan Heights in 1981. Okay, and formally it was accepted by USA, by Donald Trump during his first term. So all these things, it's okay. But the fact remains that you cannot ignore history. You cannot ignore the turbulence in their relationship. They don't have diplomatic missions. Neither of the countries with each other. The first and foremost thing is to identify each other and have a diplomatic establishment. They don't have that. So these are the kinds of controversy which is actually why Donald Trump is pushing. Donald Trump is pushing. I won't say good or bad. I'll just reflect my thoughts that yes, times are changing. It is okay to legitimize the non-state actors in the world order to bring peace and harmony. But at what cost? Here is a ISIS or Al-Qaeda leader who's become president of Syria. He's killed people. He's been responsible for MAM. Okay, and why is he going in for such hard bargaining? The basic hidden agenda of this is Syria is being given space to grow, legitimization is being extended because there is abundance of oil in Syria, and this oil has got a unique quality. The sulfur content, I think, is very, very competitive. And you have US troops also deployed in Syria near the oil fields. So there is a hidden aim and objective behind everything US is doing. Nobody is clean-hearted or doing a favor to the global peace and harmony. So therefore, he's pushing the agenda. How far it will succeed, Thomas? I'm afraid I can't say. The way we are actually going in, the time will tell whether this will be successful or not. And look at the way they have bombarded Damascus. Now, from Golan Heights, they have reached a feature which is 40 kilometers, looking deep into the Syrian territory. 40 kilometers. They can bring an artillery fire and capture, go in for a progressive and very favorable military operation. This is by the IDF I'm talking of. Israel is in a very advantageous position. So therefore, to negotiate well, let's give peace a chance. If it is going to give us any breakthrough, optimism is always welcome. And let's wait and watch. Time will tell us as to what is in the offing.
Of course, in Syria, still an extremely complicated country with many different dynamics. Where does this leave Kurdish forces, Turkish interests, and the control of northern Syria? Are they simply being sidelined here in political deal-making?
Absolutely. Well, you made a very strong point, I would say. You see, behind all this, the Kurdish nationals, they have been demanding the status of autonomy or independence. Unfortunately, they are so located. You see, the division, the boundary lines of all these countries, they have been drawn by the British Empire in such a manner that the one community is spilled over. They have partly there in Turkey, partly in Iraq, northern Iraq, they partly there in Syria, some spilling over towards Jordan side as well. So if you look at it, there is a hidden agenda. America is pro-Kurdish, by the way. He also wants to give them due recognition and bring in peace to their demands by accepting, if not all, some of the projections which they have made in the past, and this will demand negotiations and engagement with multiple stakeholders, which is even more serious. It is more serious. So therefore, in times ahead, let's see. Donald Trump is definitely making an all-out effort. I have all the compliments for him. He is yet to prove his competence and capability as a peacemaker, but at least he's trying. Despite all challenges, here is a man whose life has been threatened thrice during the campaigning, yet he is holding his neck out, sticking his neck out, at least for peace in Central Europe, peace in Middle East, and likewise, I think he needs to be given collective applause by the global body, and pray to God that he succeeds in his attempt. It's a remarkable initiative that he is taking, and he should sustain, he should not give up midway, because this is going to bring in peace, harmony, development, progress, and make us look at the 21st century with a hope of rules-based international liberal democratic value system to prevail in 21st century. That is the only thing which will take the world body to some stability and normalcy.
Major General Satakaji, thank you very much as always. It's a pleasure speaking to you. Thank you for taking the time. We now move over to Africa for our next story, and British former world heavyweight boxing champion Anthony Joshua was involved in a fatal car accident in Nigeria's Ogun state that left 2 people dead, local authorities have confirmed. And according to the Ogun State Police Command, Joshua, who's 36 years old, sustained only minor injuries after his vehicle collided with another car along the Lagos-Ibadan expressway. He was taken to hospital for treatment later and reported to be stable. An eyewitness told local media that nothing happened to him, indicating Joshua escaped serious harm despite the severity of the crash. Nigeria's Federal Road Safety Corps said 5 men were involved in the accident, 2 people were killed and 2 others escaped without injuries, and Joshua suffered minor ones. Officials have not disclosed who was driving the vehicle carrying Joshua at the time of the collision, and both the police and the FRSC said the investigations are ongoing to determine the exact cause of the crash. Let's listen in to what an eyewitness had to say. Okay, we're now by Ayanuga Olug.
As everybody shouts, Anthony Joshua, me too, I go there. Everybody just they do picture. So many everybody no shouting, say they no loud down. So some people loud down. If you say they will start, they no go shout, they go shout. So they shout, everybody come near there way. Come be Anthony Joshua. Maybe say everybody see normal. See him, but not to do him.
Joining us now is Ayanuga Olugbenga Paul, a public affairs analyst, joining us live from the Nigerian capital of Lagos. Thank you very much for joining us. What more can you tell us about this incident? What do we actually know at this point beyond the initial police statements?
Anthony Joshua was involved in the accident not too far away from my house, actually, because, you know, I don't know how I can relate it with India, but I'm sure that some people will live in Delhi and work in will work in Delhi and live in nearby states because of the cost of living being you know, a commercial and capital city. So the same way Lagos is the commercial capital of Nigeria, while a lot of people work in Lagos and live in Ogun State. So that is what happened. His hometown is actually my kinsman from the same hometown of Shagamu, is inside Ogun State, not too far away, about an hour or 45 minutes drive from Lagos. And he from the information I gathered, he landed about 6 hours before the incident happened. So he was on his way to his hometown to greet his kinsman when the incident happened, and the location happens to be not too remote. It's a federal expressway, but it's far away from basic you know, facilities such as the rescue team, and so the timeliness of their arrival. But despite that, they still made it in time because the Federal Road Safety Office was nearby, but it's unfortunate that he lost 2 of his bodyguards who were with him. They all flew in from Europe to celebrate the festivities in Nigeria, and those guys have always come to Nigeria with him. So it feels really, really sad to have that happen. But, you know, this has been the hallmark of this festive period, with people being in a hurry and then overspeeding everywhere. Just yesterday evening, not too far away from where that incident happened, about less than 5 miles from where that incident happened, I was at a bus stop to get something when another vehicle also lost its brake and nearly rammed me. You know, I mean, that same yesterday. So it's a challenge that we have been facing despite major effort by the government, because we must give kudos to the government irrespective of how not up there they are yet, but they keep doing a lot of sensitization, a lot of orientation this period for people to drive safe, for people to take it easy. But you know, there's this general rush around festive period where people want to get to their destination, and so they ignore all this warning, because the collision was with a parked truck. So it was a static truck that they rammed into, and it was the severity of the collision that led to the instant death of the 2 bodyguards that came with him into the country. Yes, we didn't the nation, a lot of people have been calling out the federal government that the emergency response time is a bit slow. But I would rather call out the state government in my state to do more, because the federal government does not control. If it were to be in Lagos State, for example, that the incident happened, of course, you will expect emergency service to get there maximum, maybe 3 to 5 minutes maximum, So, but in Ogun State, they are not as equipped as Lagos is, and so the blame, if any at all, should be on the state government to provide more emergency services, because they actually are getting more money from the federal purse since this current administration came into power in 2023 than they used to get before. So it should reflect. But above all, I think everybody has to take their own safety serious by driving safe this festive period, by checking their vehicles before going out, because basically that is the bottom line that led to this incident. Our thoughts and prayers are with Anthony Joshua, and I hope that this will not discourage him from coming into the country in the future.
Hi, Anuga Olugbenga Paul. Thank you very much for such valuable insight into that situation. Pleasure to have you on the programme. We now move on, and Australian police have confirmed that 2 gunmen who opened fire at a Jewish celebration in Sydney's Bondi Beach earlier this month acted alone. Naveed and Sajid Akram are accused of killing 15 people at a Hanukkah event on December the 14th, marking Australia's worst mass shooting in almost 3 decades. While authorities initially linked the attack to Islamic State, police have now stated that there is no evidence the men were part of a larger militant group or received formal training during their trip to the Philippines. Sajid Akram was killed by police during the attack, while his son Naveed remains in custody, facing 59 charges including murder and terrorism offences. We move on, and the United States has granted Samsung Electronics and SK Hynix annual licenses, allowing them to bring chip manufacturing equipment into their China-based factories through 2026, according to sources familiar with the matter. The move offers temporary relief to the South Korean chip makers after Washington earlier decided to revoke broad license waivers that had allowed certain technology firms to ship equipment to China with fewer restrictions. Under the new system, the US will issue approvals on a yearly basis for exports of chip-making tools to China. Previously, Samsung, SK Hynix and Taiwan's TSMC benefited from a special status known as validated end user, which exempt them from many export controls. But their status is set to expire on December the 31st. Remains a crucial manufacturing base for Samsung and SK Hynix, particularly for conventional memory chips, demand for which has surged amid rapid expansion of AI data centers and tighter global supply. Well, that's all that we have time for. Keep watching NewsX World for more international updates.
What we can do as the Interparliamentary Union to strengthen democracy, to promote human rights, to ensure that humanitarian law is respected.
UN Security Council needs a makeover, a comprehensive reform, and India deserves a position there, a role there.
Prime Minister Modi during Operation Sindoor made it amply clear that war has never been India's choice. We are with the side of peace. We are neither neutral nor indifferent. We are with peace.
we would have dealt with the U.S. a whole lot on trade and those kinds of things, and that's not as certain these days. So we have to go back and look at our European partners, our Asian partners.
An opportunity to exchange, to have a dialogue, to have a debate on a different perspective on finding the solution of the conflict.
First thing that is important to have a common ground, and that we do have with humanitarian laws and human rights, but also to say, okay, what does it mean for us as a country to act on these laws, and how can we work together?
When we realize that there's something wrong with democracy, the institutions and policies, values come together and we take stock, and it's possible then to improve and chart a new course for democracy.
It's the people's right to self-determination, and if they want to be independent, they should be independent. We will not start a war against Greenland.
Hello and welcome, I'm Thomas Porteous and you're watching The World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top stories this hour. Yemen's Presidential Leadership Council Chief Rashad al-Aloumi cancels the defence deal with the UAE and orders Emirati forces to leave within 24 hours. He announces a 72-hour sea, land and air blockade after a Saudi-led strike targets alleged foreign support for UAE-backed separatists. The Saudi-led coalition says it launches a limited airstrike on Yemen's Makala port, targeting what it calls foreign military support for southern separatists. The strike comes amid escalating tensions between UAE-backed STC forces and Saudi-supported government troops, with no immediate report of casualties. US President Donald Trump says the United States could support another major strike on Iran if it rebuilds missile or nuclear programs, and warns Hamas of severe consequences if it does not disarm. Speaking alongside Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu, he suggests Iran may be trying to restore its weapons capabilities. A senior advisor to Iran's supreme leader warns that any aggression against the country will face an immediate harsh response after Donald Trump threatens to eradicate any nuclear rebuilding. He says Iran's missile and defense capabilities are not containable and will be used if provoked. US President Donald Trump says he's not concerned about China's military drills around Taiwan, calling them long-standing naval exercises. The comments come as Beijing stages blockade-style maneuvers near the island following a large US arms sale to Taipei. South Korea says President Lee will visit China from January the 4th to the 7th as Seoul urges peace and stability in the Taiwan Strait. The Foreign Ministry says it hopes cross-strait relations develop peacefully through dialogue. Bangladesh's former Prime Minister Khaleda Al-Zia dies at 80, Bangladesh National Party has said. The party announces she passed away early on Tuesday and asks supporters to pray for her. Turkish police detained 110 suspects in a major operation against Islamic State, a day after a deadly gunfight left 3 police and 6 militants dead in Yalova. Authorities say the raid followed an 8-hour siege and comes amid heightened security after recent mass arrests over alleged holiday attack plots. We have some breaking news coming in to start this hour, and Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi has expressed deep concern over reports of an alleged attack on the residence of Russian President Vladimir Putin. In a statement, Modi emphasized that ongoing diplomatic efforts remain the most viable path towards ending hostilities and achieving lasting peace. He urged all parties involved to stay focused on those peace efforts and avoid any actions that could undermine them. Of course, we'll continue to bring you all the updates coming out of the Russia-Ukraine conflict as soon as we get them. Now we move over to the Middle East, and Saudi Arabia has condemned the UAE's support for separatist forces in Yemen, calling it a serious threat to regional security. This comes after Saudi-led coalition airstrikes targeted Emirati-backed forces in the port city of Mukalla. Saudi officials say these strikes were in response to a weapons shipment from the UAE intended for separatists, escalating tensions between Riyadh and Abu Dhabi. The shipment, which arrived at Mukalla's port from the UAE's Fujairah, was deemed a threat to stability in Yemen. The UAE has yet to respond to the attack, and Yemen has also cancelled its defence pact with the United Arab Emirates as the conflict intensifies. Joining us now to discuss this is Sol Sadka, a political commentator. He joins us live from Tel Aviv. Thank you very much, Sol, for joining us and speaking to us here on NewsX World. How dangerous is this rift between Saudi Arabia and the UAE? Are we now witnessing a proxy war or a proxy confrontation, I should rephrase, between these two Gulf powers inside Yemen?
It could well be, as you said. To call it a proxy war might not be an understatement. It's not just the Saudis and the Emiratis who have their own allies in war-torn Yemen, but also, of course, the Iranians, and they all seem now to be going at each other using their various proxies. It's quite alarming. It's terrible for the people of Yemen, who are the most miserable and God-forsaken people in the world, the most miserable place to live, where there has been endless war for decades now. And what will yet come of this is unclear. It's unclear why the Saudis and the Emiratis, who previously were relatively well washed together on the eastern parts of Yemen, the parts not controlled by the Houthis, are now at each other's throats. But time will tell. It's very early days.
Yeah, indeed. Do you think this escalation effectively destroys what remained of the coordinated coalition strategy in Yemen? Are we now heading towards a fragmented and even more chaotic conflict here?
It's hard to say. It's hard to say. What seems to have triggered this is the weakening of the Houthis themselves. So the conflict has largely been static for years now. But due to the strikes that the Houthis have taken, particularly on their top leaders a few months ago, where a bunch of them were wiped out by Israel, it seems that the Houthis are being pushed back. Their ability to rearm from Iran has also been limited, both by continual attacks on their supply routes and also continuing attacks on Iran. Iran, for the past 6 months, since they were brutally knocked out in terms of their military for a while, they lost a lot in June this year, and since then it could be they have not been able to supply the Houthis as well as before. So it could be that the weakening of the Houthis, who control approximately a third of Yemen, has reactivated the conflict to the point where other groups now smell blood in the water, and that will motivate them all to get back in the fight with the Houthis and perhaps also with each other. It's a real mess.
Sol, do stay with us after we move on. Of course, we'll continue to follow that developing situation in Yemen as it transpires. We now move on to another update, and according to reports, US President Donald Trump and his top advisors raised concerns over Israeli policies in the West Bank during meetings with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in Florida. The White House discussions focused on settler violence, expansion of Israeli settlements, and Israel's decision to withhold billions of dollars in tax revenues owed to the Palestinian Authority, a move that has pushed the PA towards financial collapse. The talks were described as cordial, but Washington warned that growing instability in the West Bank could undermine efforts to stabilize Gaza and expand the Abraham Accords. Asked afterwards whether he raised concerns about settler violence, Trump said he and Netanyahu discussed the West Bank at length and acknowledged differences, adding that he trusts the Israeli leader to do the right thing. Sol joins us once again. This is an Axios report that has just come out. Of course, now even the US is raising concerns about settler violence in the West Bank. Does Israel now accept that this is a serious problem, and why isn't there been stronger accountability?
I would say like this. every single time the Netanyahu-Trump meetings have occurred, I think this is 6 times now. Under no previous administration has any leader ever met with a foreign leader 6 times in a year. And every single time this happens, for weeks in advance, the press, particularly Axios, as you mentioned, has been predicting that there is a rift between Trump and Netanyahu, that they're arguing about everything, that they dispute all these things, there's tension, and that is always based on anonymous sources. And of course, the same thing happened this time. And yet, last night, we watched a press conference between Netanyahu and Trump, where again we noticed that these two men seem to genuinely love each other. They seem to have a personal affinity and friendship. And there was almost no way to put a piece of paper between them. And you would think that would make the reporters at Axios, who put out these reports predicting between the two, think. And yet, this morning we see that they are spinning what happened yesterday as some kind of rift between Netanyahu and Trump. When you actually watch the video, you see there was no such thing.
So Donald Trump has been vocal about Israel's actions in the West Bank. He said that he's not going to let Israel annex the West Bank. Of course, the Trump administration is particularly friendly to the likes of Saudi Arabia and Qatar, and who have also raised concerns about Israeli actions in the Palestinian territory. Why continue expanding these settlements at a time where the US is warning that instability in the West Bank could undermine regional diplomacy and even Israel's strategic interests?
I would consider as follows. You have to view it from the perspective of the Israeli public. The Israeli public was divided 20 years ago on the subject of whether it is worthwhile having Jews live in the ancient regions of Judea and Samaria and Gaza. And to the extent that in 2005, the public supported and voted in the government who promised to remove all the Jewish people from Gaza, and that was done. And we saw what happened as a result of that 20 years later. As a result, the general view of the Israeli public, which is after all a democracy, is that they have no further stomach for removing Jews from areas. And on the contrary, there are many who would like to see more Jews living in those areas. So that's what we're seeing. We're seeing the product of radicalization, reaction to Islamic terrorism, and a public that has no more stomach for piecemeal compromise. And one can only hope that indeed that Trump certainly wants to see the Abraham Accords expanded. They certainly want to see Saudi Arabia join them. However, Israel is only willing to compromise up to a certain point to make that happen.
Right.
Saudi Arabia stands to gain a lot more from joining the Abraham Accords than Israel. Israel, after all, is a very wealthy country with a GDP per capita of $60,000 per annum, richer than Germany, for example. And it's done that without any relations with Saudi Arabia or many of its neighbors. I'm sure it will benefit financially and in terms of peace from those relationships. However, it's doing quite fine without them. Saudi Arabia is entirely a petrostate and is looking into the future quite bleak, and certainly would like to have a military alliance with Israel, because Saudi Arabia has a lot of problems that are buried under the surface but very much exist. So hopefully we can come to these agreements, and hopefully by the fact that Israel will suspend further building in the West Bank will be used as a lever to make them come to the table and make everyone sit around and work together. And one can only hope that works. Then there will be no problem. Then it doesn't matter if there are another 1,000 Jews living in Judea or 1,000 less. That no longer matters if the entire region is at peace.
The occupied, yes. Okay. Sol Sadka, thank you very much for joining us here on NewsX World. It's a pleasure to have you on the programme. We now move on and over to the Indo-Pacific. In South Korea, there's called for calm as dialogue and as tensions rise in the Taiwan Strait following China's largest ever military exercises around the island. Seoul said it wants cross-strait relations to develop peacefully through dialogue and cooperation, stressing that peace and stability in the Taiwan Strait remain critical. South Korea added that its long-standing position on Taiwan has not changed, while it maintains formal diplomatic ties only with Beijing. China said its military fired rockets and conducted live fire drills in multiple zones surrounding Taiwan for a second day as part of exercises codenamed Justice Mission 2025. Taiwan's defense ministry confirmed live firing north of the island, with debris landing within its contiguous zone. The drills began shortly after the United States announced a record arms package for Taiwan, further raising regional concerns. Let's listen in.
중국은 대만 해협의 평화와 안정이 지속이 되고 대화와 협력을 통해 양안 관계가 평화적으로 발전해 나가기를 희망을 합니다. 대만에 대한 우리 정부의 기본 입장에는 변함이 없으며 관련 동향을 주시하면서 한반도 평화와 안정을 최우선으로 우리 국익 정전을 위한 외교적 노력을 기울여 나갈 것입니다.
Collins Chong-Yu-Keat joins us now, a Foreign Affairs, Security and Strategy Analyst from Kuala Lumpur. Thank you very much for joining us here on NewsX World. It's a pleasure having you on the program. Do you think these exercises are defensive training, as Beijing claims, or are they intended to intimidate Taiwan and normalize a state of near constant military pressure?
Well, it aims to normalize these bellicose actions, psychological warfare on Taiwan, strict start warning to Taiwan and to Japan and the US that again Taiwan remains the ultimate red line for Beijing. We have seen that before for years now, and this is no exception. But this comment from Seoul is rare because we have seen how it reflects this concern over this regional spillover risk for South Korea in terms of mainly in terms of trade routes and economic stability. We have seen how Seoul is increasingly aligned with this broader Indo-Pacific status quo stability, and that its own security environment with both China and North Korea also. And of course, we have seen how the economic interests are closely tied with Taiwan in terms of supply chain, in terms of semiconductor sector stability, and Taiwan plays a critical role in this, not only for South Korea, but of course also for the world and for China and for the US. So we have seen this is a normal response from Seoul, but it is rare, and also it shows the complexity of Seoul's relations with both Beijing and Taiwan. And as much as Seoul wanted a stable tie, a stable partnership with Beijing, still concerns are raised on the possible ripple effects of any upending of rules or norms across the Taiwan Strait. And we have yet to see those kind of responses as akin to what Takahashi has stated. I don't think Seoul will go along that line in order to maintain its ties with Beijing, its economic ties most importantly. And we'll see that this is again another psychological warfare, a continuation of Beijing's own assertive actions on Taiwan, but stopping short of this readiness for war. As I've stated, it won't happen under Trump's watch, and this is again a reminder, a stark reminder by Beijing to Taiwan and to Japan that you should not cross the red line being set.
Indeed, and of course, President Lee Jae-myung is expected to go to China from the 4th of next month to the 7th. Do you expect this to appear in their discussions, or will that simply be undermined?
It will be undermined, but of course the president will most likely bring this up. And of course, again, Seoul would not want to jeopardize relations with Beijing, especially with this visit. And he would likely call for these de-escalation processes, and of course also to respect the normative stability of this region. But of course, again, I think the president will also most likely reiterate the stance of Seoul to respect the status quo and one China policy, as has been, of course, expected by Beijing. So I won't see any kind of, different bold moves by him to upend or to cause, to upset the apple cart in this regard. The chief on his mind will be on the need for Seoul to have a new rebuilt economic ties with Beijing, especially, and that and the Taiwan factor is not looming large on the interests of South Korea as opposed to Japan, and I don't see this being raised as a frontline factor for Seoul to raise this meeting with the president in the days to come.
Collins Chong-Yu-Keat, thank you very much for joining us here on NewsX. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. We now move on, and hundreds of supporters of the leftist Libre party gathered outside Honduras' National Election Council in the capital on Monday, protesting the results of the recent presidential election. The demonstrators, led by former presidential candidate Rixi Moncada and the Libre party leader Manuel Zelaya, rejected the results and demanded a full recount. They accused the electoral body of irregularities and fraud. Conservative candidate Nasrai Asfura, backed by the US President Donald Trump, was declared the winner after weeks of delays and technical issues with 40.3% of the vote. His nearest rival, Salvador Nasrallah, scored 39.5%. China Asset Management, the nation's largest ETF provider, has launched 2 flagship exchange-traded funds in Thailand, giving local investors easier access to Chinese blue chip and tech stocks. The new ETFs track China's CSI 300 index and the technology-focused Star 50 index, and were issued as a depository receipt on the stock exchange of Thailand. Thai firm InvestX Securities partnered with China AMC to manage issuance and market making. China AMC said the launch aims to attract medium to long-term foreign capital while reflecting strong local interest in Chinese assets. The move also highlights growing financial cooperation between China and Thailand under Beijing's Belt and Road Initiative. Well, that's all that we have time for this hour. Keep watching NewsX World for more international news updates.
In the midst of death, life persists. In the midst of untruth, truth persists.
Hello and welcome. I'm Kriti Mehta and you're watching the World Report on NewsX World. Let's start with a check of the top headlines. Yemen's Presidential Council cancels UAE defense deal, paving the way for UAE forces in Yemen to leave within 24 hours. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi, Donald Trump among world leaders to express concern over the attack on Russian President Vladimir Putin's residence. Ukraine's foreign minister called on other countries to refrain from responding to what he said were false Russian reports about an attack on Vladimir Putin's residence, saying they undermined the peace process. Taiwan's defense ministry says PLA rockets fell into areas that were closest to main Taiwan Island compared to previous drills. Donald Trump says the United States could support another major strike on Iran if it rebuilds missiles or nuclear programs, and warns Hamas of severe consequences if it does not disarm. Speaking alongside Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, he suggests Tehran may be trying to restore its weapons capabilities. A senior advisor to Iran's supreme leader warns that any aggression against the country will face an immediate harsh response. After Donald Trump threatens to eradicate any nuclear rebuilding, he says Iran's missile and defense capabilities are not containable and will be used if provoked. US President Donald Trump says he is not concerned about China's military drills around Taiwan, calling them long-standing naval exercises. The comments come as Beijing stages blockade-style maneuvers near the island following a large US arms sale to Taiwan. Meta Platforms Meta is buying AI startup Manus to deepen into agentic AI, aiming to embed the technology across its platforms as competition for next-gen AI intensifies. Viewers, now Ukraine has ordered the evacuation of more than a dozen settlements in the northern Chernihiv region, which borders Moscow-allied Belarus and has been the target of Russian shelling. This comes as Russia continues to intensify its campaign against Ukraine amid ongoing peace talks in Florida and discussion on the 20-point peace plan proposed by US President Donald Trump. Authorities have specifically prioritized the mandatory evacuation of children, often requiring them to be moved in armored vehicles to protect against first-person view drones. Evacuees are typically directed to transit centers in safer regions like Dnipropetrovsk or further west to Lviv and Rivne, which they receive psychologically support and cash assistance from groups like UNHCR. All right, I now invite Professor Wesleyan Popovsky, who is a professor and vice dean at the Jindal Global Law School, to join me. Thank you very much, Professor, for joining me once again. And now Ukraine, of course, ordering evacuation in areas near Belarus. Is a retaliatory attack imminent after reports of Putin's house being struck?
Well, Russia is bombing everything for 4 years. So I don't know what is retaliation for what, but it's clear that civilians, unfortunately, in Ukraine are not safe and they need to be evacuated. So any intelligence saying that they are not safe, they should be taken seriously. And accordingly, those orders come, and Ukraine is trying to protect its civilians. And it will continue doing that. And by the way, interestingly, if we notice the number of casualties, that has been minimized recently in the last 3 months. September was a very heavy heavy toll on civilian casualties. And since that has been minimized, there were obviously electricity cuts and other suffering of the Ukrainian civilians. But that signals to us that Ukraine, with the help of the European countries, could now protect its civilians better. And less casualties are also some good news, meaning that there are more air defense systems to protect the cities and the civilians in Ukraine. But evacuation is necessary when some intelligence tells us that those people would be in jeopardy, at risk.
Professor, what do you make of the strikes on Putin's residence that Russia alleges is by Ukraine?
Oh, this should continue. Putin should be under daily strike because he's the aggressor here, and the aggressor must be punished, as all aggressors in history were punished. So if that continues, more better. I would welcome to try Ukrainian to try to do this again and again. Putin, as a major war criminal and aggressor in the last now 11 years since he annexed Crimea, must be under attack, as well as every other military target in Ukraine, every general, every officer, every soldier, every ammunition, including oil and gas refineries, oil tankers. All these are military targets. Ukrainian will continue targeting those, and more better.
Well, Professor, you are saying that Ukraine will continue targeting, but Ukraine has denied that it carried out these strikes. So
it did, but we don't know. Again, they probably deny because they don't want to escalate the conflict. We will see what happens and who. I would say it was even better if the Russian opposition, if the Russians who are disillusioned with Putin tried to kill him. In the same way as Muammar Gaddafi and Saddam Hussein and other dictators were, in fact, Adolf Hitler was several times. There were assassination attempts on those in the past. So Putin should worry Russians more than Ukrainians. You're absolutely right, Kriti, here. That there is no safe place for Putin. He doesn't only endanger the lives of Ukrainians, but he also killed 1 million Russian soldiers in Ukraine soil. So he's as criminal for the Russians as he's criminal for the Ukrainians and for the rest of the world. So
but Professor, many are saying that Russia would not launch a similar counter-strike targeting Zelensky at least.
I'm sure if they could have done it, they would have done it. They're absolutely merciless. Don't listen to the Russian propaganda. Everything they say is a manipulation. Everything they say is a lie. I don't listen to Russian propaganda and I don't take anything out of Kremlin.
All right, I hear you and all the parties involved. But thank you very much, Professor, for joining me for now. And with that, viewers, we're now going to proceed. Now, student protests erupted across Tehran and Isfahan universities as demonstrators voiced anger over rising prices and declining living standards. The unrest follows recent demonstrations by shopkeepers in Tehran's Grand Bazaar, who shuttered their stores for the second day amid record low currency values. The Iranian rial has fallen sharply against the dollar and euro, worsening inflation and economic hardship. President Masoud Pezeshkian and government officials have acknowledged the protests, pledging dialogue with demonstrators and promising reforms to stabilize the monetary system. Iran's parliamentary speaker, Baghir Khalifa, stated that the people's concerns must be addressed.
که دغدغه و اعتراض مردم در خصوص مشکلات معیشتی باید با مسئولیت پذیری کامل پاسخ داده شود و گفتگو به ویژه با نمایندگان اصناف و اتخاذ اقدامات لازم با محوریت افزایش قدرت خرید مردم و اصلاح روند تصمیم گیری های اقتصادی در دستور کار مسئولان اجرایی قرار گیرد.
The unrest adds to a pattern of repeated protests over the past few years, highlighting public frustration with economic pressure, sanctions and currency volatility. Authorities have previously suppressed similar demonstrations with crackdowns, but the government now says it will listen to protesters' legitimate demands. Shaul Satka, who is a political commentator, joins me now live from Tel Aviv. Thanks, Shaul, for joining me. How do you see these protests now escalating?
It's too early to tell at this stage. We've had a number of waves of protests in Iran over the past 5 to 10 years. And in general, put down with alacrity by the Iranian regime, who have been in power there since 1979. Whether this round of protests is what finally pushes the regime out, seeing as they really weakened over the past year with the loss of all their proxies from Hezbollah to Hamas to the Houthis, proxies that they essentially bankrupted their nation to supply. They also lost their ballistic missile program and most of their nuclear program as well in June. All that has been their primary goal over the past few years, the past decades in fact, and that's all gone. It was all for nothing. They bankrupted their economy for nothing. In 1979, when the Islamic